Welcome to Mr. Boogeyman, where every story is a journey into the unknown. If you enjoy the thrill of the eerie and unexplained, consider subscribing for more chilling tales. The clock on the station wall ticked inexorably towards midnight as Emily stepped onto the platform, a wave of exhaustion washing over her. The library, with its warm lights and dense volumes, had felt like a sanctuary just hours before, but now it seemed a distant memory. The thrill of having completed her last exam faded into the chill of the damp night air. She had hurried to the train station, comforted by the thought of returning to her room, ready for a long night's sleep. But as she arrived breathless, the sight of the last train pulling away, and her helplessness at that moment, sent a shiver of panic racing down her spine. The station was a ghost of its daytime self. Fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows over the empty benches. Only a few souls lingered, absorbed in their own worlds, a pair of tired travelers clutching steaming cups of coffee, and an elderly man lost in thought on a nearby bench. Emily thought of asking for help, but the thought of interrupting their solitude felt intrusive. She pulled out her phone, attempting to distract herself with the glow of the screen, but her attempts were futile. It was just too quiet. That's when she first noticed him, a man sitting at the far end of the platform. He seemed to melt into the shadows, yet his eyes glimmered like dull coals, fixed firmly upon her. A disquieting knot began to form in her stomach. She told herself he was simply another weary traveler, but as the seconds stretched into minutes, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. With her heart racing, she tried to focus on her phone, hoping to lose herself in a mindless game or an endless scroll. But every glance towards him sent a jolt of unease coursing through her. Time dragged on, and with every passing minute, the man shifted, inching slightly closer, while maintaining a veneer of detachment, as if he were an observer in a gallery rather than a person. The remaining passers-by began to dwindle, leaving Emily increasingly isolated in the gathering darkness. She would steal glances, her breaths shallow and quickening. Was it her imagination? seeped through her resolve as she scanned the area for an escape route. Every glance sent a jolt of dread through her, for every turn revealed nothing but the bleak walls of the station, devoid of salvation. Remembering her earlier thoughts, Emily made a snap decision.
"Stay back!"
she shouted, holding her phone in front of her like a shield.
"I swear, I'll call for help!"
But the resolve in her voice faltered as he moved even closer, looming like a shadow come to life, his gestures becoming more threatening as he disregarded her words. In a moment of sheer desperation, she darted past him, her instincts overloading, propelling her toward a narrow corridor that stretched into the darkness. The air became heavy as she fled, but just as she thought she gained distance, she heard the sound of footsteps behind her, echoing her own frantic attempts to escape. With a sudden rush, Emily stumbled into a maintenance room, the door barely clicking shut before she leaned her back against it, her heart racing in her chest. The room was cramped, filled with dusty equipment that loomed ominously around her. Dim light flickered above, casting long shadows as she desperately searched for a way out. Panic clawed at her throat as every creak of the building felt like the harbinger of her doom. Trapped within this sanctuary-turned-prison, Emily's breath came in short gasps. Came a whisper, full of malice. As Emily's resolve wavered, she understood that this was no longer a game. It was a battle of survival, and the outcome depended on her next move. The air in the maintenance room was thick with tension, each moment stretching into an eternity as Emily listened intently for any further sounds of her pursuer. The hard knock at the door had sent adrenaline coursing through her veins, sharpening her senses and igniting a fierce instinct to survive. With the sobering reality of her solitude ringing in her ears, she scanned her surroundings, searching for anything that might serve as a weapon or a means of escape. The flickering fluorescent light above cast unreliable shadows, revealing a disheveled stack of wooden crates in the corner. Crouching low, she approached the crates, the rough edges biting into her palms. The sound of her heartbeat reverberated in the silence as she pushed aside dust and decay, unearthing an old pipe, heavy, cold, and resolute. It would have to do. Just as she gripped the makeshift weapon tightly, her heart lurched at the sound of footsteps moving away from the door, a chilling reminder that he was still there, lurking, waiting for her to falter. Had he decided to leave? Or was this merely a cruel ploy to draw her out? Panic threatened to engulf her again, but she forced herself to breathe deeply, steadying her resolve. In a moment of clarity, Emily remembered a narrow crawl space she had spotted earlier, concealed behind a rusted shelf. If she could just make it there without him noticing, she might find a way out. With calculated stealth, she edged towards the shelf, her breathing shallow, the pipe clutched tightly against her side. As she slipped behind the shelf, the world outside faded into muffled echoes. The tight confines of the crawl space enclosed her like a grave, but she pressed on, pushing through the tangled darkness. Just as the taste of freedom seemed within reach, a sudden jolt made the ground vibrate. The door burst open with a violent creak, and she stifled a gasp, heart hammering in her chest as she heard him enter the room.
Emily, You can't hide from me,
he taunted, his voice slithering through the shadows like a snake. The sound sent a shiver down her spine, but ignited a fire within her. She wouldn't be his prey any longer. Summoning every ounce of courage, Emily darted out of her hiding space, pipe raised high, ready to defend herself. The man turned just as she swung. His malevolent grin faltered, shock painting his features for a brief moment before he moved to counter her strike. The clang of metal against metal echoed in the cramped space, and their struggle erupted into a visceral clash of wills. Adrenaline surged through her as she ducked and weaved, using the pipe not only as a weapon, but as a tool of distraction. With every swing, she felt an ever-growing sense of empowerment, the fear that had once bound her, beginning to slip away with each moment. He was strong, but desperation was a fire that fueled her resilience. In a split second, she saw her chance, a narrow opening at the back of the room that led into another storage area, half hidden by fallen debris. Emily seized the moment, shoving past him, every fiber of her being urging her to escape. She stumbled through the opening and into the dimly lit corridor beyond, heart pounding and limbs trembling. As she raced down the hall, she could hear him cursing behind her, the sound slicing through the air like a knife. The hallway seemed endless, but the flickering light ahead promised hope. Emily's footsteps echoed fiercely, a reminder of her progress, of her defiance. The station, once a claustrophobic trap, transformed into a labyrinth of liberation as she sprinted onward. Finally, she skidded to a halt before a set of double doors adorned with emergency exit signage. With trembling hands, she pulled them open and burst into the cool night air, the stars twinkling above her in stark contrast to the darkness within the station.
Help! Somebody please!
She screamed, her voice breaking as she collapsed onto the pavement, every ounce of fear giving way to relief and sheer exhaustion. A light flicked on from nearby, illuminating the scene as figures rushed towards her. It wasn't long before the sound of sirens filled the air, intertwining with the fading echoes of her harrowing encounter. Relief washed over her in waves, but the gravity of the situation and the danger she had narrowly escaped settled in like a chill in the air. As the police arrived and apprehended the man who had tormented her, Emily felt a flicker of strength return. She had faced the darkness, challenged it, and survived.